Welcome back, friends and astrology lovers. Today we're going to do a more in-depth study of the nodal shift that's occurring on May 5th. So I'm going to pull up that chart so we can look at it and talk about it. Okay, so again, this is May 5th. It happens early in the day on the East Coast. And so we can see here the nodes at 0 degrees, and they have been in Cancer and Capricorn axis for a year and a half. So you can see here the North Node is now at 0 degrees of Cancer, and the South Node is at 0 degrees of Capricorn. So the North Node is the direction of our evolution. It's the future. It's the direction we want to move in, the direction that Spirit is calling us to move in. And the South Node is the past. It's what we need to be done with. It's what we need to release. So the thing to think about is to look in your own birth chart and to see where you have Cancer and Capricorn, like which houses you have them in. So that could be the 1st and 7th house axis, 2nd and 8th house axis, 3rd and 9th house axis, 4th house and 10th house axis, 5th and 11th house axis, or the 6th and 12th house axis, okay? So whichever house it was, the North Node was in, that tells you what you needed to be working on during that year and a half. So as an example, if the North Node was in the 1st house of self, it was saying that you needed to work on developing your own sense of identity, your individuality, self-responsibility, self-reliance, and to be able to empower yourself and to have agency and to be able to balance your needs with the needs of others, because the opposite side is the 7th house of others. But with the North Node in the 1st house of self, you will be more focused on what your needs are. Although, because you're always dealing with the axis, you would need to learn to balance needs in relationships and develop healthy boundaries, okay? And yet the North Node always tips it a little more in the direction of the house where it is residing. So I'm not going to go through every single house in this video, but if you have a natal chart, you can find out where Cancer is in your chart, which house. And then you can see if you did the work for the last year and a half when the North Node was in that house. And if you haven't done the work, then it's time to get to it, okay? Because we're running out of time here. You do not want to miss out on the opportunity for growth with the North Node in Cancer. And when it's shifting on May 5th, it will shift into Gemini, and then the focus of your karmic lessons will shift. And this is important because this is a new karmic activation that happens. But keep in mind that we will also have eclipses this summer, and 2 of those eclipses are in Cancer and Capricorn, which means that the final work for growth and life change will come with those eclipses. The new moon eclipse is on June 20th, and it is actually at 0 degrees of Cancer, where the North Node is at on May 5th, before it shifts into Gemini on May 5th. And so whatever you were meant to learn, something new will be born from that year and a half learning, okay? So the reason we need to do our karmic work is because if we don't do our karmic work, then when something new is born, it's more difficult. It's a more difficult birth, and it can become distorted, okay? So if we don't do our karmic work, we have to carry it forward until the nodes go around again And we're forced to deal with those issues again because everything is going around over and over and over again in a spiral. We always get another opportunity, as long as we're alive, to deal with these karmic issues. So why not deal with them now while you have the opportunity? Why put it off for another 18 or 19 years? You know, I mean, do you want to go through the next 18 and 19 years being stunted? Of course not. So you want to do your work now. So again, the nodes shift on May 5th, and then we have a new moon eclipse in Cancer at 0 degrees of Cancer on June 20th, which will activate the lessons, the final lessons of something new being born in your life in that house. And then there will be a full moon eclipse 2 weeks after that, which will be on July 4th. And those will be the final lessons that will be brought to bear with the nodes in that axis. So again, if you miss the opportunity, it may not come around again for another 18 to 19 years. And therefore, anything you could have learned to strengthen yourself through this karmic lesson and this karmic growth cycle will be missed. So you don't want to miss that opportunity. So you really, really, really want to do your work in those houses before it's too late. All right, so then they move into Gemini and Sagittarius. And so you will want to look and see where those axes are in your chart so you know which houses. So as an example, if it's moving into your 6th and 12th house axis, your 6th house is outer work and the 12th house is inner work. Or like here, you can see it's in the 3rd house axis because Gemini rules 3rd house, and the 9th house axis because Sagittarius rules the 9th house. So wherever it's landing, those are the lessons that need to be learned. So as an example, if it were landing in the 12th house, then you would be needing to learn spiritual lessons, doing spiritual development, spiritual retreats, spiritual practice, releasing, letting go, because the 6th house is outer work and the 12th house is inner work. The 12th house is not interested in material possessions. So with the North Node in the 12th house, you would be releasing, okay? Releasing, not just material possessions, but anything of the material world. It doesn't mean you're going to lose things. It just means that your focus is changing. And it actually may also mean losing things because it's also the house of endings. It's the house where we let go and release things. So with the North Node there, that becomes our focus. Down here in the 3rd house is the mind. So we would want to be focused on new ways of thinking, new ways of learning, new ways of communicating with the North Node in the 3rd house. So these are just some examples. What you need to do is find out where you have Cancer so that you know what the final lessons are to be learned in the first half of the year until you run out of time, basically. And then what your house is for Gemini, because that's where the North Node will move into on May 5th. To your Gemini, wherever that house is, figure out what the issues are of that house, wherever you have Gemini, okay? Now, at the time of this North Node shift, this nodal shift, we have some very interesting things that are happening at that moment, which will color the entire transit of the North Node through Gemini for the next year and a half. And what is happening is that we have a lot of energy here in Taurus, one of which is Uranus, which will be there the entire time that the North Node is moving through Gemini. So we will continue to experience disruption and change and revolution in the issues of Taurus, which have everything to do with our physical, material, financial well-being, meaning everything that we need to survive, basically. You know, everything. The agriculture, food, supply chains, how we get our groceries, how we feed ourselves, how we shelter ourselves, and the financial systems and currency and the economy. everything is being disrupted right now, and it's not going to go back. Okay, that's the important thing to understand, because I know a lot of people do not like change, and they want nothing more than for things to go back the way they used to be. And I think it serves you better if you just accept the fact that it's never going back to the way it used to be. Okay. So the question is, what do you want to create? Since you know it's not going to go back to the way it used to be, what do you want to create in your life now and for the next 18 or 19 years? I say that because although Uranus will only be in Taurus for another 6 years, so maybe you're just thinking about the next 6 years, or maybe you're just thinking about the next year and a half while the North Node is in Gemini. But eventually, this will come around again in another 18 or 19 years when the nodes come around again. So that's why we have to always be thinking ahead, because most people, the way that they think, they don't think in cycles like this. And so they don't realize that the issues will come around again. And so if you take advantage of the opportunity now to learn what you need to learn, to make the changes you need to make, then when it comes around again on that cycle, then you'll be much more prepared, because you will have learned the lessons that you needed to learn. So you're coming at it from a higher level of consciousness and skill development. Okay. So it's magnified with the Sun and Mercury in Uranus. The Sun is a benefic, and it is a kind of authority, but I see it more as internal authority, okay? And Mercury is the ruler of Gemini. Mercury is all about the things that we think about. It's mental. It's the things we think about, that we are learning about, that we are talking about, that we're communicating about, that we're reading about, everything on the mental level. So we're going to learn a lot about these issues of agriculture and supply chains and how we get ourselves fed and everything else we need for our survival, and the vulnerabilities that are in our current system. Okay. So all of these systems, all of these institutions, all of the infrastructure around how we survive, the things that we need for our bodies to survive, and the economy, because the economy is just a representation of getting our physical needs met. Okay. All of this is going to change. It's not going back to the way it was before, ever. Okay. So once you accept that, then decide what do you want it to be like? Do you want to find ways to secure your food supply? I think that would probably be a good idea. Do you want to find a way to be financially independent so that if you lose your job or if the economy crashes into a recession, you are okay? See, I was thinking about this 18 and 19 years ago, back when 9/11 happened, because that was the cycle. See, that's what you have to understand. They do come around in cycles. And so I was aware of what was happening. I made changes, and my life was minimally disrupted. There's almost no change in my life, because I extracted myself from that fragile, vulnerable system and became financially independent. So I work for myself now, and I don't live in a house of cards. I made sure that my needs would be met, even though they're simple, and I'm perfectly happy with that. I actually like it a lot better than being overstretched with financial commitments and such, or trying to impress other people. I don't care about impressing other people. So anyway, so those are things we'll need to be thinking about, okay, during this cycle. And the other thing is with the Venus square to Neptune, especially with Venus in Mercury, this is called mutual reception, because Venus rules Taurus, Mercury is in Taurus, Mercury rules Gemini, Venus is in Gemini. That's called a mutual reception. And that makes the energy of each of these planets, in a sense, kind of more intense. They, because they are expressing each other's energy in each other's houses. So that combination makes it more intense. That we will be thinking about all the things related to Taurus, okay? Thinking about it, learning about it, talking about it, writing about it, trying to change it, come up with new plans, come up with new ideas, new visions, all those things will be happening. But there is a slight problem, which is the square to Neptune when Venus is about to go retrograde. A square to Neptune is problematic anyway, but she's about to go retrograde, which makes it even more intense because she's literally going to square Neptune 3 times. And each of those 3 times, she is in this really intense energy of her stationary retrograde, okay? And what is this about? Well, it can be about some beautiful things like the fantasy and the vision. You know, we can visualize our ideal, and that is a good thing because, I mean, this is going to be unbelievably creative energy that can be used for visionary dreams and ideas and ideals and what we want for the future, and that's spectacular. That's the way we want to use this energy. Unfortunately, what we are seeing happening is the lower vibration of this energy. And it's also interesting that Venus is squaring Neptune because Neptune is actually the higher octave of Venus. And so, so this is beautiful energy. It's fabulous for creativity and vision and idealism. Unfortunately, most people are functioning at a lower level of consciousness, a lower vibration. And when they do that, they basically swim around in sewage. And what I mean by that is it's all about trying to figure out which narrative is the right narrative. And you know what? What this Venus square Neptune is trying to teach us is that it's all illusion anyway. You know, if you're lost in that sewage of illusion, you're not seeing the real point. The point is to climb out of the sewage and wash yourself off. You know, get up to a high point, like, you know, the summit of a mountain, because Capricorn is the mountain climber. Climb up to the high point of a mountain and to see the entire landscape. And up there, you're breathing the clean, rarefied air. You know, you're getting the sunshine, you're getting the blue skies, you're connected to spirit. Your mind is clean, your psyche is clean, your body is clean, your soul is clean, and you just release all that sewage, you know? So if you're wasting your time trying to figure out whose fault it is, who's to blame, who's right and who's wrong, which narrative is the right narrative, and what's the origin of all this, and you know, where did it come from, who's the good guy and who's the bad guy, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You're wasting precious life energy swimming around in sewage because you're missing the point. The point is that it's all an illusion. That sewage doesn't matter. If you think it does, it's because you're lost in ego and fear. You want to find somebody who's the bad guy, somebody who's wrong, so that you can feel better and judge them. But that's the ego. Spirit wants us to rise above that and to envision a new way of life based in an ideal. You know, what would it be like? Imagine it. That's the calling of the age of Aquarius. What could it be like if we had the utmost liberty and freedom that we could possibly have? That's Uranus, ruler of Aquarius. Every individual has as much freedom as possible and is connected to the collective in a caring and compassionate way. That's Neptune, okay? So we can create structures. That's Saturn. Saturn in Aquarius. Even though right now it's squaring Uranus, it doesn't have to mean that we have to be at war, okay? Some people, when they're swimming around in the sewage trying to figure out who's right and who's wrong, who's the good guy and the bad guy, they're wasting this incredible, precious energy that the divine cosmos is sending down to us saying, hey, you can create something new, baby. You know, if you're just going to climb up to that high point and look out at the landscape and envision a better world, that's what we're called to do in the age of Aquarius. You can do it. You can do it right now. Just climb out of the sewage, get up to that summit, look out on the landscape and envision the world that you want to create, and then be the change you want to see. Okay? It can be done. So that's what we're being called to with Venus squaring Neptune, if we are willing. Okay? If you're not willing, if you want to swim around in the sewage, well, there's nothing I can do for you, because I'm not going to go there anymore, personally. I'm not interested in wasting this precious divine energy talking about that kind of garbage. Okay, so Pluto. Again, Pluto is the god of the underworld, which means Pluto rules death. And we are obsessed with death right now. And that's not a bad thing. There's no judgment. It's just an observation, because Jupiter is conjunct Pluto, and Jupiter expands everything related to whatever it touches. So it's expanding the power of Pluto. Pluto is the god of underworld. It's the god of death. So we're thinking about death, which is a good thing because it makes us aware of the fact that we are mortal. And it's not about going into fear about death. There's nothing to fear, ultimately. What it's really trying to do is to show us that the time that we have on this earth, having this earthly experience, is so incredibly precious. Please do not waste it. You know, I mean, how much time do we actually have? You know, I don't know how much time you have, but you could probably make a guess. And that time will go by faster than you can possibly imagine. And we also have to acknowledge that, you know, a person can get sick and die at any moment. That's just reality. That's life. And that's how we use death as an advisor. It helps us to be aware of our mortality, not to make us scared, but to make us wake up to how precious every single moment is. So that's what these planets are asking us to do. And in a sense, we're crossing a threshold on May 5th, crossing a threshold, entering a new dimension, a new classroom where there will be new lessons. It's a nodal shift, it's a karmic shift, and it's a new karmic activation. So that's what we're doing on May 5th. We're crossing that threshold into a new classroom with new lessons and a new cosmic curriculum. So you get to decide what you're going to do with this unbelievably incredible energy. What are you going to do for the next year and a half? Are you going to swim in sewage, or are you going to climb to the summit and make the absolute best use of this energy that you can possibly make? I know what I'm going to be doing to the best of my ability. I'm not a perfect human being, but I am setting my intention to make the best use of this energy. And I hope you will too. All right, so that's it for today. And I will be back with the other alignments that are coming up in May in chronological order. So I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.